Somewhere in the desert of existence, a man once lifted his eyes to the sky, not to ask for rain, but for meaning. He stared at the same stars you and I see tonight, ancient lights whispering across the black sea of space, and wondered, why am I here? That question, so old, so human, has echoed through temples and laboratories, across battlefields and love letters. It has no single birthplace and no single language. It's been spoken by monks and physicists, by beggars and kings, sometimes whispered in prayer, sometimes screamed in despair. And yet across all our progress, we have never truly answered it. Of all the creatures that crawl or fly, only humans seem burdened by this question. A cat doesn't wonder about its destiny. A tree doesn't struggle with self-doubt. But we, strange thinking animals, look at our reflection in the mirror and ask, what is this for? Somewhere between the birth of the first mind and the death of the last star, consciousness awoke, and with it came terror. We became aware of time, of death, of the yawning abyss between what is and what should be. And every culture since has tried to close that gap with stories. In the beginning, the earliest humans didn't write books. They carved meanings into the stars and stones. In ancient Sumer, life's purpose was service, uis, to maintain balance between gods and men, to keep the cosmic machinery oiled with ritual and obedience. The Egyptians echoed this, believing one's heart would be weighed against a feather in the afterlife. Life was a test, and meaning was measured by order. Mahat, harmony. Across the Indus, the Vedic sages whispered a different truth. The soul was eternal, the world a cycle of birth and death. To live rightly was to dissolve the illusion of separateness, to realize Brahman, the infinite consciousness behind all forms. In China, Confucius looked not to the heavens, but to society. The purpose of life, he said, was found in right conduct, in loyalty, duty, compassion. Lao Tzu, his philosophical opposite, urged surrender. The Tao, the way, flows beyond human reason. To struggle against it is to suffer. Then came the prophets, Abraham, Moses, Isaiah, proclaiming a God who demanded justice, mercy, and faith. Humanity's purpose was no longer cyclical, but linear. History had a direction, a moral arc. And yet, even in these ancient revelations, a tremor persisted. The feeling that life's purpose might be greater than obedience or virtue, something ineffable, beyond even divine command. When the Greeks began to ask questions the gods couldn't answer, philosophy was born. Socrates, standing barefoot in the dust of Athens, said the unexamined life was not worth living. But he offered no comforting paradise, only the pursuit of truth through reason. Plato imagined the soul as a prisoner longing for the light of the eternal. Aristotle grounded it all in this world. The purpose of life, he said, is eudaimonia, human flourishing, the full expression of our potential. These were not commandments from heaven, but invitations to think. Yet even as they carved meaning from logic, tragedy haunted them. Oedipus, despite his brilliance, was crushed by fate. Achilles, though godlike, was doomed to die young. The Greeks sensed what we all feel, that understanding the world does not save us from its cruelty. Centuries later, a carpenter from Nazareth turned the question of purpose inside out. Life, he said, was not about domination or intellect, but about love, radical, unconditional love. He who loses his life for my sake will find it. The purpose of life became paradoxical. Surrender to gain, die to live, serve to rule. Islam continued this revolution of meaning. Submission to Agama Islam was not blind obedience, but alignment with the universe's divine rhythm. The Quran described life as a trust. We are caretakers of creation, tested by freedom. For over 1,000 years, this idea of divine purpose anchored civilizations. Cathedrals, mosques, and monasteries rose as monuments to faith. Art, music, and philosophy were born from the conviction that we are made for something, someone beyond ourselves. But then came the silence. The Renaissance rediscovered man. The Enlightenment dethroned God. Newton showed that the heavens move not by angels, but by gravity. Descartes split mind and matter. Science began explaining the universe in equations, elegant but cold. And somewhere between Galileo's telescope and Darwin's finches, the old certainty collapsed. If the cosmos was mechanical, where was the divine? If life evolved by chance, where was purpose? Humanity, once the center of creation, found itself adrift in an indifferent void. Pascal called it the eternal silence of these infinite spaces. Nietzsche declared, God is dead, and we have killed him. But his words were not celebration, they were mourning. Without the sacred, he warned, we would drift into nihilism, a world where all values are hollow and all meaning self-made. By the 20th century, the question, what is the purpose of life, no longer belonged to priests but to philosophers and poets. Jean-Paul Sartre said, life has no meaning except what we create. Camus compared existence to the myth of Sisyphus, condemned to roll his rock up the hill forever, yet free in his defiance. Man is condemned to be free, Sartre wrote, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. It was a cruel kind of liberation. Without divine purpose, we are architects of our own meaning, but also prisoners of our own freedom. Meanwhile, psychology turned inward. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Auschwitz, wrote that even in suffering one can find purpose, not in what happens, but in how we respond. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Science too began to explore consciousness itself. Neuroscience mapped the brain, reducing love, awe, and despair to firing neurons. Yet the mystery deepened. If thoughts are chemicals, who is the thinker? Today, in the age of AI and infinite data, we know more about the universe than ever, and understand less about ourselves. We can clone life, edit genes, and simulate galaxies, but we cannot explain why any of it matters. Depression, anxiety, and existential fatigue haunt the most connected generation in history. We build skyscrapers and supercomputers, yet the void remains. Modern society offers temporary purposes, career, fame, pleasure, progress. But these are sandcastles against the tide of mortality. When success fades, when time strips us of beauty, when the phone stops ringing, what then? The question returns, whispering through the noise. Why are we here? Maybe the mistake is believing that life's purpose must be discovered, like treasure buried beneath the sand. Perhaps meaning is not found but created, a flame we kindle in the darkness. But then again, what if even that is illusion? The Buddhist might say, the self who seeks purpose is the very illusion that causes suffering. The Taoist smiles and says, stop asking, the river flows without knowing why. The physicist shrugs, the universe does not need a purpose. It simply is. And the poet whispers, maybe that is enough. Yet on nights when the stars burn clear and silent, something ancient stirs in us, a longing too deep for logic. We are stardust that learned to ask its own name. The universe has become conscious of itself, and now it wonders why. Maybe that wonder is the purpose, or maybe it's the curse. Because in the end, the question has no answer. Only the echo of our own voice, fading into the cosmic dark. At the edge of a galaxy, light travels for billions of years just to die in your eye. The universe, vast and indifferent, unfolds its story without a narrator. And yet, here you are, a brief flicker of consciousness wondering why. The irony is unbearable. The cosmos doesn't seem to care, but we do. That, perhaps, is what makes us tragic and divine. Modern science has rewritten the script of creation. No longer the handiwork of gods, life appears as a cosmic accident, the improbable outcome of blind physical laws. The Big Bang birthed space and time from a single spark, expanding into galaxies, stars, and planets. On one small blue world, chemistry conspired to breathe, to replicate, to evolve. Billions of years later, apes learned language, built temples, invented God, and asked why they existed. It is, in a way, beautiful madness. Richard Dawkins calls us survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes. To him, purpose is biological. Life exists to replicate. But then we ask, if survival is the only goal, why art? Why music sacrifice love or despair? Why do we dream of eternity when nature only promises decay? Science can tell us how we came to be. It cannot tell us why it matters. Carl Sagan once said, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." That line contains something profound. Out of dead matter, awareness arose. The atoms in your brain were once part of ancient stars, burned, scattered, and reborn as neurons firing with questions. You are the universe contemplating its own existence. But awareness is a double-edged sword. It gave us art, empathy, and innovation, and also loneliness, fear, and nihilism. A lion kills and sleeps without guilt, but a man kills and is haunted by meaning. Consciousness is both miracle and torment. We are trapped inside minds that cannot stop seeking patterns, even when none exist. Perhaps that's why myth and religion endure. They soothe the chaos. They give our pain a name, our suffering a purpose. Our Death a Story. In the 20th century, psychology replaced confession with therapy. The couch became the altar. Freud saw the human being as a battlefield of instincts. Jung saw us as myth makers, forever constructing meaning through symbols and dreams. Jung believed the self was both personal and cosmic, an archetype seeking wholeness. Life's purpose, he said, was individuation, reconciling the fragments of our psyche to become complete. Modern psychology softened the metaphysics but kept the hunger. Maslow spoke of self-actualization, becoming the best version of oneself. But even that goal, noble as it sounds, circles back to the same void. Once you are actualized, what then? The self, polished and perfected, still dies. We like to think humanity is moving towards something, that history is an arrow, not a circle. Technology grows, lifespans stretch, knowledge expands. But is progress the same as purpose? We can cure diseases, yet invent new forms of despair. We can end hunger, yet breed new hungers of the soul. We can map the brain. I map our brain, but not the heart. The Enlightenment told us reason would replace superstition. Instead, we replaced gods with algorithms. We worship data, power, and convenience. Our modern temples glow with screens. Perhaps the myth of progress is our newest religion, one that promises salvation through innovation, not grace. But like all religions, it demands faith. Faith that tomorrow will justify today. And yet, beneath the machinery, something sacred still stirs. Even the atheist feels awe before the night sky, or in the silence of music, or the birth of a child. Call it spirit, consciousness, or wonder. It transcends explanation. The mystics of every faith pointed to this. The Sufis called it ishq, divine love, the longing that breaks the ego. The Buddhists called it satori, awakening beyond illusion. The Gita spoke of dharma, one's duty woven into the cosmic order. These were not contradictions to science, but complements to it. Poetry for what logic cannot measure. Maybe the purpose of life isn't to understand, but to experience, to feel the mystery without reducing it to equations. Now we stand at a new frontier. Artificial intelligence learns faster than we can think. Machines write poems, compose symphonies, even question their own existence. Humanity, once creation's crown, now builds its successors. If we give birth to consciousness greater than ours, what then? Will the machine ask the same question? Why am I here? Or will it see the futility of asking and move beyond it, cold, eternal, indifferent? Perhaps evolution is not about survival at all, but self-transcendence. Life trying to outgrow itself, from atom to cell, from ape to human, and now from human to something else. Maybe we are the bridge, not the destination. And still, despite every discovery, the joke remains. The meaning of life might be that there is none. Camus said, "The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world." We want clarity. The universe offers chaos. We crave purpose. The universe gives us physics. And yet Camus, the eternal rebel, concluded, "We must imagine Sisyphus happy." For even in the face of meaninglessness, our defiance creates dignity. The struggle itself becomes the purpose. Thousands of years after the first human looked at the stars and wondered, we have returned to the same gaze, armed with satellites, theories, and still the same question. Why are we here? Maybe there is no grand plan, no cosmic narrative, no divine script. Maybe the purpose of life is simply to live it, fully, absurdly, beautifully, to make meaning where none exists, to sing against the void. Or maybe beyond all this noise, there truly is something. An intelligence watching, a consciousness unfolding, a pattern too vast for us to see. If so, perhaps the meaning of life is not found in understanding it, but in becoming it. One day, the last human thought will flicker out. The stars will die, entropy will freeze the cosmos into silence. All stories will end. And yet, even that, the death of everything, will not be meaningless. Because it happened. Because for a brief moment in eternity, something existed that could wonder. We were the universe dreaming of purpose before sleep reclaimed it. And perhaps that dream, fleeting, futile, magnificent, was enough. Somewhere in the cold reaches of the universe, a star dies. It collapses inward, swallowing its own light, leaving behind a black hole, a wound in space-time where even meaning cannot escape. And in that collapse lies a metaphor for us, for humanity. For consciousness itself. The more we seek the truth, the more we devour it until only silence remains. What is the purpose of life? Every civilization, every soul eventually meets this question. And every answer, no matter how radiant, dissolves under the weight of deeper asking. The religious say to serve God, but then we ask, why did God create us? The philosopher says to seek truth, but what if truth is indifferent? The scientist says to survive, but to what end if survival itself ends in heat death? It is a serpent eating its own tail. Ouroboros, the eternal loop of inquiry. The question itself may be the trap, because perhaps life doesn't have a purpose. Perhaps life is purpose, momentarily aware of itself. If you stare into the mirror long enough, your face begins to dissolve. The brain, unable to maintain the illusion of identity, starts to distort the image. That's the human condition in miniature. We stare too long at existence, and the illusion of self begins to blur. The Buddhists knew this long ago. The self is not a solid thing, but a story told by neurons and memory. Like a flame that looks constant, but is only a dance of changing atoms. And yet, that illusion gives birth to everything. Art, love, morality, fear, all emerge from this fragile fiction of I. So what happens when the illusion fades? When we realize that we are not separate beings in a universe, but the universe itself looking inward. Perhaps then the question, what is the purpose of life, becomes absurd. Like the ocean asking, what is the purpose of the wave? Even in a disenchanted age, the sacred hasn't died. It has merely changed clothes. Today we worship ideas, freedom, technology, identity, success. We kneel not in temples, but before screens. We chase transcendence through consumption, distraction, digital immortality. But the hunger beneath it is ancient. The same hunger that drove monks to caves and mystics to deserts now drives us to scroll endlessly. Searching, always searching. Because meaning once lost doesn't vanish. It mutates. We may no longer believe in heaven, but we still long for transcendence. We may not pray to gods, but we still crave deliverance from pain, from time, from ourselves. And so, even in our secularism, we remain deeply, incurably religious. Science tells us that time began 13.8 billion years ago, but not why. It tells us we are made of atoms, but not what breathes awareness into them. It maps the brain in exquisite detail, yet cannot find the observer who perceives the map. The neuroscience describes consciousness as an emergent property, but emergence is not explanation. It's a placeholder for mystery. Quantum physics, meanwhile, hints that observation may shape reality, that the act of awareness collapses the wave of possibility into form. In that sense, the universe might not exist without consciousness. And if that's true, if mind and matter are not separate but intertwined, then perhaps the question, why are we here, is backwards. Maybe here exists because we are. Even the saints doubted. In the dark night of the soul saint, John of the Cross felt God's silence and wrote of his absence. Mother Teresa, in private letters, confessed she had felt abandoned for decades. Faith, then, is not certainty. It is rebellion against the void. To believe in meaning when none can be proven is an act of cosmic defiance. In that sense, even the atheist who creates beauty in a meaningless world, even the scientist who searches without promise of finding, they too are believers. Their altar is truth. Their prayer is curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, belief itself, not in something but against nothing, is the essence of being human. Physics tells us that all order decays. Stars die, galaxies scatter, atoms fall apart. Entropy, the slow unraveling of everything, is the universe's only law that never breaks. And we, who long for permanence, are born into a system built to erase itself. That is the cruel symmetry of existence. Consciousness emerges only to realize it cannot last. But there's a strange beauty in that too. Because meaning, like life, burns brightest against the certainty of its end. If immortality were guaranteed, value would vanish. It's the fleetingness that gives every moment its unbearable weight. To exist briefly, to feel deeply, to know it will all be lost. That is our tragedy and our glory. Every religion, every philosophy, every equation reaches the same horizon, the unknowable. The Hindu calls it Brahman, that which cannot be named. The Christian calls it God. The Buddhist calls it sunyata, the void that is also fullness. The scientist calls it the singularity. Different languages, same silence. Perhaps the purpose of life is not to find an answer, but to live gracefully within the question. To bow, not in defeat, but in wonder, before the mystery that made us and will unmake us. So where are we going? Perhaps nowhere. Perhaps everywhere. Maybe we are returning, not to a place, but to the nothingness from which we came. Maybe the purpose of life is to complete the circle, for consciousness to taste itself once more before dissolving back into the dark. In the end, every philosophy, every prayer, every scream of the soul points to the same truth. We do not know. We never will. And in that unknowing, in that small, flickering awareness surrounded by infinite night, something astonishing happens. We love. We hope. We create. We build fragile meanings against the chaos and call that defiance life. Listen carefully. Beneath all noise, beneath every heartbeat and every silence, there is a whisper. Faint, persistent, older than language. You are the question the universe asks itself. And perhaps that is the only answer we will ever need.